Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarin, and my capstone is titled Bridging Policy and Practice, Evaluating Washington State's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Strategies in Comparison to Other U.S. Frameworks. The project started from a simple tension. Climate change demands rapid greenhouse gas reductions, and US states have adopted very different strategies to get there. Yet their progress is uneven and sometimes hard to compare. Washington has the Clean Energy Transformation Act, or SETA, which mandates 100% carbon neutral electricity by 2030 and a full phase out of fossil fuel generation by 2045. At the same time, California relies on cap and trade system and Texas leans on a market-driven, non-mandated model anchored in massive wind deployment. I began this work with my central question being how effective are Washington's greenhouse gas policies compared to other states like California and Texas, and what improvements could Washington's utilities sector make to be more efficient and more equitable? Over time, that evolved from a broad comparison into something more specific. Not just whether Washington was good or bad, but whether its regulatory design, its reliance on hydropower, and its treatment of municipal utilities shape real world outcomes. My capstone took a form of a research practicum. I conducted a comparative policy analysis focused on Washington's SETA and a case study of Seattle Public Utilities. This meant reviewing legislative and agency documents from the Washington Department of Commerce, California's Air Resources Board, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Energy and Information Administration. I then paired these with technical reports on utility efficiency and global assessments like the IPCC's sixth assessment report. I use quantitative metrics such as changes in emissions, policy timelines, and sectoral coverage to compare these three states and see how they structure their climate policies and who is actually included in the accounting. During my research, I tried to convert this into a coherent story. Um, Washington, California, and Texas all face the same global climate constraints and all have developed ambitious sounding strategies. However, they differ dramatically in tools and timelines, market-based versus mandate-driven versus largely voluntarily approaches. And all of them are still behind the IPCC's call for a roughly 43% reduction in global emissions by 2030. This means there is space to compare these models and bring in municipal scale data where we can identify realistic ways to strengthen Washington's framework. From that foundation, my results focus on three main areas. First, Washington's SETA does what many policies struggle to do. It sets clear milestones and creates enforceable obligations for utilities. The state's heavy reliance on hydropower means its electricity sector starts from a relatively low carbon baseline, and recent coal retirements and growth in non-hydro renewables show measurable progress towards decarbonization. At the same time, that hydro dependence ties Washington's future to climate-sensitive snowpack and river flows, which raises long-term resilience questions for the broader state well beyond Seattle. Secondly, when Washington is placed alongside California and Texas, which have different strengths and weaknesses. California's cap and trade program has reduced covered sector emissions on the order of the low teens percent and generates billions in revenues for climate and equity programs. Yet it struggles with local pollution burning in low income communities living near regulated facilities. Texas, by contrast, has become a wind powerhouse without binding emissions caps, showing how far market signals can go. Yet, it shows how vulnerable progress is to price swings and regulatory uncertainty. Washington sits somewhere between these. It offers regulatory certainty and an explicit social cost of carbon, yet it is slower than global timelines and still incomplete in how it can count indirect emissions. Thirdly, the municipal and sectoral levels turned out to be critical. Reports from the EPA and studies of water systems show that efficiency measures such as pump optimization, leak detection, and conservation can cut emissions from water and wastewater utilities by 10 to 30%. Seattle Public Utilities' own programs already avoid thousands of metric tons of CO2 per year. By visiting the Toll Dam and reservoir, which supplies a large share of the region's drinking water, this was made concrete to me. Infrastructure decisions at a single facility ripple out to more than 1 million people and to the emissions tied to that water. These findings have led to several key conclusions in my research. Washington's SETA is a promising model of enforceable utility-driven climate governance. However, it lags behind the global 2030 benchmarks and does not fully integrate municipal utilities or indirect emissions into the state's official picture. California demonstrates how revenue recycling and market mechanisms can raise money and drive reductions, but it also offers a cautionary tale about equity and localized harm. Texas illustrates both the potential and the limits of relying primarily on deregulated markets and the favorable geography. Across the three, the missing piece is often consistent, transparent accounting that connects policy design with real outcomes in communities and sectors. In the end, in the end, I would thank you guys for listening to me, and I'm happy to talk more about any part of my journey, from the Toll Dam to SETA timelines to what it takes for Washington to truly align with global climate goals while centering equity and local communities. Thank you.